You won't believe what Lithuania is doing at the Russian border. Picture this, a tiny Baltic nation with just under 3 million people, standing shoulder to shoulder with the world's most powerful military alliance, NATO, while staring directly into the eyes of an aggressive and unpredictable neighbor, Russia. That's Lithuania, a country often overlooked on the world map, but right now, this small state is making moves so bold, so provocative, that global media from London to Washington, from Brussels to Moscow, can't stop talking about it. And the question is, why? Why is Lithuania suddenly in the spotlight? And why is Russia so angry at what Lithuania is doing on their shared border? This is not just about geography. This is about history, about politics, and about a clash of values. Lithuania knows what it's like to be under Moscow's grip. It lived through decades of Soviet domination. And now, with Russia waging war in Ukraine, Lithuania has decided it will never again be a silent bystander. So today, we're diving into the story Western media calls one of the most dangerous escalations in Europe. Lithuania is making moves that are shaking the Kremlin, shocking European diplomats, and even dragging NATO into a standoff right at Russia's doorstep. This headline shook Moscow. The BBC reported how Lithuania, implementing European Union sanctions, blocked Russian goods from moving through its territory to the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad. For those unfamiliar, Kaliningrad is like a Russian island surrounded by NATO members. It's sandwiched between Poland and Lithuania, with no direct land connection to mainland Russia. So what Lithuania did was simple, yet explosive. It said, EU sanctions mean certain goods can't pass through our territory. That included coal, metals, construction materials, and high-tech products. For Russia, this was more than just trade. It was a symbolic humiliation. Moscow suddenly found that a small Baltic state was standing in its way, cutting off supplies to one of its most militarized regions. The Kremlin immediately called it a blockade. But was it really a blockade? No. Civilian goods, food, medicine, all of that could still pass. But for Moscow, the fact that a former Soviet republic was now enforcing EU rules against Russia, it was unbearable. Think about the irony here. For decades, Lithuania was forced to follow Moscow's orders. Today, Moscow has to follow rules imposed by Lithuania. That role reversal is what made this headline so powerful. And Russia did not take it lightly. Reuters reported Moscow's angry threats. The Russian Foreign Ministry called Lithuania's action unprecedented and unlawful. Some Russian officials even hinted at measures that will hurt the Lithuanian people. Now pause here. Let's reflect. A nuclear superpower, the largest country on Earth, openly threatening a nation of just 3 million people. Why? Because Lithuania enforced European Union decisions. This shows you the level of insecurity in the Kremlin. But the threats weren't just words. Russia conducted military drills near the Lithuanian border. State television began discussing scenarios of cutting Lithuania off from electricity, from trade, even suggesting that Moscow should reconsider Lithuania's independence. Of course, these were empty threats. Lithuania is a NATO member. Any attack on Lithuania means an attack on the entire alliance. And Russia knows this. But the fact that Moscow even raised the stakes tells you something. Lithuania's move hit Russia where it hurts most, its pride. For the Kremlin, it wasn't about goods going into Kaliningrad. It was about control. The idea that a former Soviet subject now holds power over Russian logistics. That was a nightmare for Putin. The Guardian highlighted the bigger picture. Kaliningrad is no ordinary Russian territory. It's home to Russia's Baltic fleet. It has nuclear-capable missiles. It's one of the most heavily armed regions in Europe. So when Lithuania blocked sanctioned goods, Kaliningrad became the center of global attention. Suddenly, analysts in Washington and Brussels were asking, what if Russia escalates? What if Moscow uses Kaliningrad as a pressure point? The Guardian's piece reminded the world that Kaliningrad has always been a geopolitical hotspot. During the Cold War, it was a Soviet fortress aimed at Western Europe. Today, it's a Russian fortress trapped between NATO states. And now, thanks to Lithuania's actions, Kaliningrad once again feels like the flashpoint of a potential conflict. This wasn't just about trade, it was about NATO's credibility. If Russia pushed too hard, would NATO defend Lithuania? Would the alliance risk a direct confrontation for a small Baltic state? These were the questions swirling in every Western capital, and Lithuania knew exactly what it was doing. By enforcing sanctions, it forced the West to pay attention. No longer could European leaders ignore the Baltic states' warnings. They had been saying for years, Russia is a threat. Ukraine proved them right. And now Lithuania was proving that it was ready to stand on the front lines of this struggle. Then came another headline that rattled Moscow. Politico reported how Lithuania worked with NATO allies to strengthen military presence along its border with Russia. This wasn't symbolic. NATO deployed more troops, more equipment, and more exercises right in Lithuania's backyard. For Moscow, this was exactly the scenario it feared. Instead of scaring Lithuania into submission, its threats only brought more NATO forces closer. Every time the Kremlin tried to intimidate, Lithuania responded by pulling in allies. It was classic judo, turning Russia's weight against itself. NATO battlegroups in Lithuania began expanding. German, American, and other European troops trained alongside Lithuanians, showing that the alliance's Article 5 guarantee, "An attack on one is an attack on all," was not just words on paper. It was boots on the ground. Lithuania's message was clear: we are not alone. And if you touch us, you'll face the entire NATO alliance. And this was exactly the kind of deterrence that made Putin's generals nervous, because Russia's military, bogged down in Ukraine, simply couldn't afford another front, especially not one involving NATO. As if blocking Russian goods wasn't enough, Lithuania decided to attack Russia where it hurts most: its history, its symbols, its propaganda. CNN reported that Lithuania began removing Soviet-era monuments, tearing down statues that glorified Moscow's past dominance. This was more than cultural cleanup. It was a bold political signal. Lithuania was saying, "We reject your history. We reject your narrative. We reject your empire." For Russia, monuments are tools of influence. They remind former Soviet states of a shared past, a common victory in World War II. But for Lithuania, those monuments were symbols of occupation, oppression, and stolen independence. By tearing them down, Lithuania was reclaiming its memory, its dignity, and its freedom. And once again, Russia could only watch in rage. State media fumed, calling Lithuania ungrateful. But the truth is simple: Lithuania owes Russia nothing. If anything, it owes its people the right to live without Moscow's shadow looming over every street corner. Now, let's connect another piece of the puzzle. Euronews reported how Lithuania built a massive fence on its border with Belarus. At first glance, you might think, what does Belarus have to do with Russia? Well, everything. Belarus under Alexander Lukashenko is effectively a puppet state of Moscow. And in 2021, Belarus weaponized migration, pushing thousands of Middle Eastern migrants towards Lithuania's border to destabilize the country. So Lithuania responded with steel and concrete, a physical barrier, kilometers long, to stop what it called hybrid warfare. This was not just a migration issue. It was part of Russia's strategy: use chaos, use pressure, use human suffering to destabilize your neighbor. But Lithuania stood firm. It didn't just build walls, it built resilience. It mobilized border guards, worked with the EU, and showed the world that it could handle Russia's dirty tricks. This was another reason Moscow hated Lithuania. It wasn't just about sanctions or NATO. It was about Lithuania exposing Russia's tactics for the world to see. The Financial Times then captured the ultimate symbol of Lithuania's rise. Vilnius, the Lithuanian capital, was chosen to host a NATO summit. Think about that. A country once dismissed as a Soviet backwater now hosting the leaders of the world's most powerful military alliance, all gathered to discuss one topic: how to contain Russia. This was a diplomatic victory for Lithuania. Hosting the summit meant more than prestige. It meant influence. It meant being at the table where the biggest decisions about European security were made. And it showed Moscow that Lithuania was no longer a pawn, it was a player. For Russia, this was the ultimate insult. Lithuania, a country it once occupied, was now leading the charge against Moscow on the international stage. And Lithuania didn't mince words. Al Jazeera reported Lithuanian leaders openly calling Russia the greatest threat to Europe. Not just a problem, not just a concern, the greatest threat. This blunt language shocked some Western diplomats, but it was the truth Lithuania had been living with for years. For them, Russia wasn't some faraway issue. It was right across the border. It was fighter jets buzzing overhead. It was propaganda flooding their airwaves. It was cyber attacks targeting their government. Lithuania's bluntness forced others to wake up. If a small state on the front lines could say it out loud, why couldn't bigger nations? Slowly, Lithuania's voice began shaping the European debate. And today, when you hear NATO leaders call Russia the most direct threat, remember, Lithuania was saying it first. Finally, the New York Times highlighted how Lithuania didn't just enforce EU sanctions. It pushed for more. Vilnius became one of the strongest advocates for cutting Russia off from European markets, from technology, from energy revenues. This was not an easy stance. Many European countries hesitated, fearing the economic pain of losing Russian gas or trade. But Lithuania had no hesitation. It understood the cost of freedom, and it argued that the price of appeasing Moscow would always be higher. This relentless push turned Lithuania into the conscience of Europe. A small country telling bigger ones, do not compromise with a bully. Stand firm. And slowly, that message resonated. So here we are, Lithuania, tiny, often overlooked, has become one of the most important players in the fight against Russian aggression. It blocked Moscow's supplies. It tore down its monuments. It built walls against its hybrid warfare. It hosted NATO summits. And it told the truth: Russia is the greatest threat to Europe. Moscow may fume, threaten, and rage, but the reality is this: the era when Russia could dominate Lithuania is over. The Baltic state has flipped the script. Today, it is Russia that feels cornered, Russia that feels blocked, and Russia that feels humiliated. And that's why Western media is going wild over Lithuania's actions at the border. Because in this David versus Goliath battle, David is not only standing tall, he's showing the world how to fight back. So that was today's video, guy. See you in the next one with another interesting topic. Till then, have a great day and do subscribe and like the channel. Thank you.